Pride is a powerful force in human behavior, and in the context of relationships, it can act as both a shield and a barrier. When a woman refuses to admit that she misses someone, it is rarely about the absence of feeling. Rather, it is about the role pride plays in protecting her sense of self. Pride is deeply tied to how we perceive our own worth, how we wish to be seen by others, and the control we maintain over our emotional vulnerability. For many, admitting that she misses someone, especially a man she cares about, can feel like relinquishing control or exposing herself to emotional risk. This instinct to protect herself is not inherently negative. It is a natural mechanism that humans use to preserve dignity and avoid the potential pain of rejection or judgment. In this context, pride operates almost like a mask. On the surface, she may appear indifferent, unaffected, or even cold, but beneath that exterior, there may be a deep longing, a recognition of the absence, and an emotional pull that she refuses to verbalize. Pride prevents her from acting on these emotions openly because doing so could make her feel vulnerable, dependent, or even weaken the eyes of others. It is important to understand that this behavior is not about deception, it is about self preservation. She is navigating her inner conflict between the desire to express genuine emotion and the fear of losing control or being seen as emotionally exposed. Recognizing this internal dynamic is crucial for interpreting her behavior accurately without overreacting or misjudging her intentions. This protective layer of pride often manifests in actions and subtle cues rather than direct statements. She may maintain a certain distance, avoid initiating contact, or appear indifferent. Yet these behaviors do not negate her feelings. They are simply the outward expression of an internal struggle, a balancing act between vulnerability and self respect. As a Stoic observer, it becomes important to recognize that her pride is not a personal affront, but a reflection of her inner world. By understanding that pride shapes her actions, you can avoid taking her detachment personally, which in turn allows you to respond with composure and emotional intelligence rather than frustration or confusion. Furthermore, pride has a way of magnifying the significance of small interactions. A casual message, a fleeting glance, or a moment of shared laughter may carry much more weight than the words themselves reveal. These subtle gestures are often the only ways her emotions can surface safely without threatening her sense of autonomy. Observing these cues patiently without pressing for overt admissions of emotion allows the natural interplay of feelings to unfold without conflict. In relationships, patience and understanding are key. Pride will often prevent immediate acknowledgement of feelings, but it does not erase the underlying truth. By recognizing the role pride plays, you can navigate the situation with empathy and awareness, creating an environment where emotional truths can be acknowledged safely and naturally. This insight is not just about understanding her, it is also about cultivating your own sense of calm and self respect, allowing interactions to evolve without force or expectation. Pride acts as a protective shield, and understanding its influence is the first step in observing her emotions with clarity and patience. When her pride keeps her from admitting she misses you, silence becomes a stage where her real emotions quietly unfold. But this silence isn't empty, it is full of tension, questions, and conflicting thoughts she tries to keep buried. And the more time passes, the more the cracks, her emotional armor begin to show. When you step back, when you stop trying to convince her, explain yourself, or pull her closer, something unexpected begins to happen inside her. The silence you maintain forces her to confront her own feelings without distraction. There is no message from you to respond to, no call to ignore, no conversation to control. All she hears is the echo of her own thoughts, and that is where the truth starts rising to the surface. At first, she may convince herself that she is fine. She may tell her friends she's moved on or pretend your absence doesn't affect her. Pride encourages her to maintain the image of strength, of independence, of emotional control. But internally, she begins to feel the void. The routines that once included you now feel strangely incomplete. The comfort she once took for granted is suddenly missing, and that absence becomes louder the longer she sits with it. She may try to fill the silence with distractions, staying busy, surrounding herself with people, or pretending she doesn't notice the emptiness. But silence has a way of slipping through every distraction, and eventually her mind returns to the same thought: why doesn't he reach out? This shift is important. When you were present, she felt secure, maybe even too secure. She knew your feelings, knew your loyalty, and knew she had access to you whenever she wanted. But the moment you pulled back, not out of spite, not out of manipulation, but out of self respect, she was forced to see something she had avoided, that relationships require reciprocity. Pride makes her hesitate to take the first step, but silence makes her realize that taking no step at all might cost her something valuable. Over time, she starts questioning her own choices. She begins to reflect on what she said, how she acted, and whether her pride pushed you too far away. This internal confrontation can be uncomfortable for her because pride hates accountability, But silence is one of the most powerful mirrors. It shows her what she truly feels when all external noise disappears. And if she genuinely misses you, that truth slowly becomes impossible for her to deny. She may replay memories in her head, revisit old conversations, or check your social media without interacting. She may wonder if you've moved on or if you still think about her at all. And these questions, these quiet, persistent thoughts, create a tension she can no longer ignore. Eventually, silence becomes a catalyst. It softens her defenses, it turns pride into reflection, it replaces emotional stubbornness with emotional realization. And even if she doesn't say it out loud, even if she never sends the message she wants to send, she begins to understand something profound. She misses you not because she is weak, but because there was something real, meaningful, and irreplaceable in what you shared. And in that realization, her pride begins to lose its power. When her pride won't let her admit she misses you, key moments of silence become emotional turning points she never anticipated. Key point 3 revolves around a powerful truth. Your absence becomes her mirror, reflecting back everything she tried to suppress, deny, or hide beneath confidence and composure. And the longer you stay silent, not out of petness, but out of self respect, the more this mirror forces her to see herself clearly. She begins to feel the weight of her own decisions, the reality of her own emotions, and the consequences of letting someone valuable slip away. This is the moment where the balance shifts, not because you pressured her, but because your silence exposes the truth she didn't want to face. At first, she believed she was in control. She believed she could pull away, act indifferent, or create distance without feeling anything significant. Pride had convinced her she would be fine, that she could walk away without regret. But as time passed, something changed. The silence grew heavier, not lighter. The space between you didn't feel freeing, it felt unsettling. She started realizing the difference between losing someone temporarily and losing someone who finally stopped reaching back. That realization hits differently. It makes her rethink not just the breakup or the argument, but her own behavior, her own patterns, and the emotions she tried to silence. She may not say it out loud, but your absence makes her replay everything. Every conversation, every unresolved moment, every word she said in anger or in pride. She wonders if she pushed too hard, if she misjudged your value, or if she underestimated how much losing connection to you would affect her. And this reflection doesn't happen all at once. It happens late at night. It happens when she sees something that reminds her of you. It happens when her phone stays quiet for too long. In those moments, silence becomes louder than any argument you could ever have. It speaks truth to her in ways you never could. Your silence also shifts the dynamic in a way she didn't expect. It subtly communicates that you are no longer operating from emotion. You've stepped into a space of strength, calmness, and acceptance. You aren't waiting, pleading, or trying to fix anything. You've returned to your own life, your own growth, your inner peace. And this, more than anything, shakes her pride. People only feel the need to protect their pride when they believe they have power. But silence makes her realize that the power she thought she had is slipping, that you are not stuck, that she is not the center of your world. And this forces her to face a truth she fought hard to avoid. She misses you far more than she was ready to admit. In that emotional shift, her pride doesn't disappear, but it cracks. And through those cracks, honesty begins to seep through. Ending line, eventually, she realizes that silence isn't your weakness, it's her awakening. Key point 4 revolves around a powerful and often overlooked truth. A woman's pride doesn't just silence her feelings, it traps her inside them. When she refuses to admit she misses you, it isn't because the emotion isn't there, it's because acknowledging it feels like surrendering control. And for someone who led with strength, independence, or emotional distance, that surrender feels terrifying. Pride convinces her that reaching out first means losing, that being honest about her feelings means being weak, and that showing vulnerability gives you power over her. But what she doesn't realize is that her pride is the very thing keeping her stuck, hurting and longing in silence. As time passes and your silence becomes steady, not reactive, she starts experiencing an internal conflict she didn't anticipate. On one side is her heart, quietly pulling her toward you, reminding her of the connection, the comfort, the stability you once gave. On the other side is her pride, commanding her to stay distant, to stay silent, to pretend she doesn't care. And caught between these two forces, she becomes emotionally torn. That conflict grows more intense the longer she waits for you to reach out. She begins checking her phone more often, wondering if you're thinking of her, wondering if you've fully moved on, wondering if she misjudged your value. Her mind may try to dismiss these impulses, but her emotions keep reminding her that silence feels colder than she expected. The more your silence continues, the more she begins to feel the consequences of her own choices. Pride may stop her from contacting you, but it cannot stop the memories. It cannot stop the late night thoughts. It cannot stop the quiet ache when she realizes you truly haven't returned. And what hurts her most is the realization that you're not chasing anymore, that you're not trying to fix it, not trying to prove your worth, not trying to keep your place in her life. That shift in your behavior becomes a wake up call, one she didn't expect and one she cannot ignore. It forces her to face a truth she tried to hide behind confidence. She misses you, and her pride is the only thing standing between what she wants and what she allows herself to do. In this internal struggle, she may try to distract herself, talk to others, stay busy, act unbothered, but none of it truly fills the void because distractions can't replace emotional connection and temporary comfort can't erase genuine longing. She may even feel embarrassed by how much she still thinks of you, especially after convincing herself she was strong enough to walk away. And that embarrassment only deepens her silence. She doesn't want you to know she cares. She doesn't want you to see her vulnerability. She doesn't want to risk being rejected after being the one who pulled away. But pride has a cost, and over time, she begins to see that the cost might be losing someone who actually mattered. That realization breaks through her ego more deeply than anything you could ever say. Necessary ending line in the end, her pride may keep her silent, but it also becomes the very thing that reminds her of everything she never truly wanted to lose. Key point 5 focuses on something subtle but incredibly powerful. Your silence forces her to face the truth she has been running from. When you step back, when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to prove your value, you create the one thing she never expected: space. And that space becomes a mirror that reflects her decisions, her pride, her assumptions, and the reality of losing someone who genuinely cared. At first, she may welcome the distance, believing it confirms her independence and emotional control. She might even convince herself that she is better off without you. But ego driven confidence fades quickly when silence stretches longer than she prepared for. As days turn into weeks and weeks stretch into months, your silence begins to hit differently. She realizes you're not waiting by the phone. You're not begging for explanations. You're not monitoring her moves or asking for closure. You've stepped into a version of yourself that is peaceful, grounded, and unbothered, and that unsettles her more than any argument or emotional plea ever could. Silence makes her question everything she thought she understood about your attachment. It disrupts the story she created where you were always available, always present, always ready to fix things. For the first time, she sees what life looks like when you stop carrying the emotional weight of the connection. And in that clarity, she starts to feel what she never allowed herself to admit. The connection meant something to her more than she expressed, more than she showed, more than pride ever let her confess. She begins to remember the security you offered, the consistency you brought, the emotional stability that made her feel safe. Those weren't things she paid much attention to before because she assumed they would always be there. But now, with your quiet distance replacing your active presence, she begins to feel the loss. Your silence also exposes the difference between attention from others and attention from someone who truly cared. She might receive messages, compliments, invitations from new people, but none of it hits the same. None of it feels genuine. None of it holds the emotional substance she had with you. And that realization deepens her confusion. She begins comparing everything new to everything she lost. Most of the time, without even meaning to, she starts measuring other men against the way you treated her, and that comparison rarely ends in their favor. What she once thought was easy to replace suddenly feels rare. What she once dismissed as ordinary now appears exceptional, and it's in this quiet shift where the truth hits her hardest. Your silence is not punishment, it's growth. It's a sign that you have chosen peace over pursuit, self respect over desperation, and dignity over emotional chaos. That maturity forces her to confront a truth she avoided. Losing a man who grows in silence is far more painful than losing one who begs in noise. Necessary ending line in the stillness you created. She finally sees the value she overlooked, and that realization leaves a deeper mark than any words you could have spoken. Key point 6 reveals one of the deepest truths of masculine growth. When you stop waiting for her return and begin rebuilding your life, her perception of you transforms completely. Not because you are trying to impress her, not because you want her to notice, but because genuine self evolution has a power that echoes far beyond your silence. Most men pause their lives after heartbreak, but the moment you choose not to pause, when you decide to move forward instead of looking backward, you step into a version of yourself she never expected to witness. And that shift forces her to confront the reality that you were never the weak one, never the desperate one, never the one who needed her more than she needed you. You were simply the one who loved sincerely. When you rise after being hurt, when you grow from what was meant to break you, it changes the energy around you completely. She sees you becoming more disciplined, more focused, more composed, and she realizes something she didn't think was possible. You are becoming the man she hoped you wouldn't become until much later or not at all. Because the stronger you get, the more you heal, The more she feels the weight of her own choices, this transformation reminds her that time moves whether she reaches out or not, and that your life does not orbit around her. It forces her to accept that another woman, someone more appreciative, more emotionally mature, could easily step in and receive the version of you she was too blind or too proud to value. Your evolution also dismantles whatever narrative she built in her mind. Maybe she assumed you'd wait forever. Maybe she convinced herself you couldn't attack. Maybe she believed you'd always be reachable, no matter how she behaved. But your growth destroys that illusion. She sees a man who has stepped into purpose, who has upgraded his lifestyle, who has found direction again. She sees someone whose silence is not emptiness but transformation. And that is the moment she realizes she no longer has access to the man she once took for granted. And here's the part that strikes her the deepest. Your improvement makes her question herself. She starts wondering if she misjudged you, if she underestimated your strength, if she walked away from someone who wasn't just good for her, but potentially the best she ever had. The more you improve, the more she feels left behind, not because you are trying to make her feel that way, but because she chose not to grow when you did. Growth makes it clear who is meant to stay in your life and who is only meant to be a lesson along the way. In the end, your transformation is the final message she never expected. You didn't become better for her, you became better for yourself, and that truth carries more power, more clarity, and more impact than anything you could have said while chasing her. Necessary ending line, and in watching your rise, she finally understands that losing you wasn't the end of your world, it was the beginning of hers unraveling.